morning. Somewhere around the 3rd, I guess, of June. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer here on the butterfly and the dandelion. That's a nice title. The butterfly and the dandelion. Well, I was just observing two butterflies, that one and another, in their sexual or ritual, sex ritual, mating ritual is a better word, sorry. And I'm sitting here watching it and I'm saying, wait, why don't I capture this on film? I think that the fluttering of a butterfly, see the radical fluttering of the colors and see how they flash? I have a theory that the butterflies that seem to be encumbered by a not so well designed system of flight, I think that it's designed by nature to attract other butterflies. Largely, I think that's true. And I just saw evidence of that because I just was watching two of them mating, which was very interesting, some of it in flight. And I wish I had gotten it on film, on video. They may recommence their annual ritual, and I hope that they would rejoin and I could share that with you. But my point is that there are so many wonderful observations to be made in nature. I so enjoy that. And I'm not going to belabor the subject right now. I have so many chores to get to. But I wanted to talk to you about one fig tree, which I mentioned in a previous video last year. And I'm going to tell a quick story. And so I'm not going to do much work in this video. And that's the joy of it. Momentarily. It won't last long. No permanence. But I'm not going to go anywhere, I don't think. Where's the butterfly? I'll keep an eye on the butterfly and see if the other one rejoins. Because it's a rare spectacle, actually. And how many of you have observed it? Probably not many, and I've only observed it several times because I force myself to become cognizant of these things, which I don't always do because I'm being deterred or distracted, or detoured is even a better word, from those kinds of delightful endeavors by a thing called work and responsibility, chores. But let's get back to what I wanted to talk to you about today. This is Brunswick, originally an English fig, and it has very interesting characteristics. This one's not very vigorous yet, but it has a long 70 or 80 year history in the family, and I want to talk to you about. These are the characteristic finger-like leaves that this particular variety is famous for. There's another version of this. I showed you another version of Brunswick, which is a broader leaf version with very similar figs and very similar, very large breba. Not as good as the main crop figs, which I showed down in Chincoteague, Virginia, and that video is available in my collection. I believe the title is the most underrated fig variety. I believe the title is, because it is very underestimated, or it's not considered a very good cultivar in most of the regions of the country, such as mine, which is 7A. I keep repeating because I keep getting asked, which is rainy and humid sometimes of the year, part of the year, especially during the harvest, it seems, too often. And this particular variety, Brunswick, doesn't fare well. It splits and cracks. It's notorious and famous, I should say infamous, for the fact that it does split and crack during rainy periods and even humid, very humid periods. And so very often the harvest will be spoiled, or part of it, sometimes most of it. However, I would like to say that when you can get Brunswick, which is a delicious variety, I love it. It's a thick-skinned, I love the flavor of the skin. I love the flavor of the pulp, or the fig itself. And I will say that it's very high ranking. I like it. It's different. It is not a member of the sugar fig, so-called, which I don't like even calling them that, or the honey figs. Certainly not the berry figs. It's a light textured interior, not dark or red, and amber color, basically, and very flavorful, though. It has sharp characteristics of what I would say refined tastes, a rich taste to it, especially when it's well ripened, and it's very prolific. So if you can catch this thing ripening during a dry period when you don't get a lot of cracking and spoiling, it's a very, very enjoyable fig to have in your collection. Well, I have this fig in my collection for another reason. I don't recommend it, by the way, over a lot of other varieties because of the spoiling and cracking. But if you have room, I would then recommend, why not have it in your collection? Now, this is the last of, I got these people, my neighbors, they have somebody over here with weed whackers and such. And my fault, I could have chosen a better time to make a video. I wasn't even paying attention, actually. So, let's continue. This particular Brunswick goes back 70 or 80 years, possibly more. It belonged to my Uncle Nick, and my Uncle Nick died a long, long time ago, decades ago. And he lived up until about in his 90s, I believe. And he brought this from Italy and planted it next to his home, which I later, about 30 years ago or so, purchased from them, from his wife, or actually their son, after his wife died too, later. And I've had that rental property for a good 30 years. And this particular variety, which he had brought from Italy, and one other, was there, and one is still there. The dark Naples, I call it, which is I guess a brown turkey type fig, but I don't want to say that because it's not like that. It's actually a very tasty fig. It's, believe it or not, of all the figs I have, it's our son's favorite fig to eat. He loves it the most. And I kind of grew up on that fig too, and I've told stories about that, my grandfather. I won't get into those, not right now. I've talked about it before, and someday I would like to go into it extensively. But for now, this fig was next to the house, without covering, not too far from a large rivershed, and in town, in a microclimate, and it never needed to be wrapped in 7A. Neither did the other, and they both survived for many decades. But at one point, a tenant started to cut this one out. This goes back 10 years, more than that, and started chopping at the roots, trying to get rid of the fig. I was devastated. I told them not to touch the figs, and but they did, and they had removed a great deal of it, and I could see that they were in the process of killing it, and nothing I was going to say was going to stop them. They weren't picking at the other variety next to it. So I thought I would rescue this variety, and I did. I took some cuttings. In fact, I took a little bit of the roots from a little sprout that was coming up, and I took some cuttings too. And I had it in 3 locations at one time, always growing really nice and producing a lot of fruit. Now it's only in 1 location, and this is it. I had it in a pot last, and I made a mistake over there. I planted it in the ground, the pot, just to get it out of the way, because I was in a million different things. I was in so many different projects, and I didn't want to have to keep watering it, and so I ground potted it, but I didn't really cut away a large portion of the bag. Okay, so I planted it in the ground, And I forgot that it was in a bag. And it was just growing alongside of the others. Here you see I've cut one radically down. Okay, and that's what you need to do if you want to get, every once in a while, you want to get more shoots and a tighter fig to the ground and with a better structure, better scaffolding. Once they start getting tall and big, I usually give them away or do this to them. But, okay, let's go back to the Brunswick. And it was not doing well when the other fig trees were doing remarkably well. And I would figure out, what the heck is going on? Then I realized it. When I reached down one time to pull some grass, I saw the tag on it, and I felt the top of the bag. And I went, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I forgot that I had buried this thing. And it was that way for like a year or so. And it didn't have adequate cuts in the bag so that the roots could spread out and so that it would be able to find the nourishment and water that it needed. And so I finally got the bag off it. I planted it in the ground last year. It's coming back, but it's taken a beating. But I promise you, it will come back. It's even starting to make little figs, you can see. And so I'm going to nourish this and give it a little extra fertilizer than I normally would, and water it a little bit more than I normally would to ensure that it comes back. Because I don't want to lose this variety. I've had this variety for decades and decades and decades, and I don't want to lose it. So that's the story on that. I should have paid attention more. I should have remembered. I didn't. And that's the story about Brunswick. This is the last surviving member, or the last of the Mohicans, you might say. It reminds me, here I go. It reminds me of a Star Trek episode back in, what was it, 1967, 8 or 9, I believe, the 3 years that show aired on television, Star Trek. And any of you fans out there might remind me of the episode where Captain Kirk and Spock and them, they transported down, they beamed down on a planet where an archaeologist was excavating ruins of a alien civilization, and apparently he was there with his wife. But it turned out that it wasn't really his wife. His wife had died, and the creature that was able to emulate any human being or any living being, it was able to project that image in your mind, okay? A shapeshifter or whatever you want to call it. The creature was a salt creature. It was the last member of its species on that planet, and it craved salt. And it had no morals, no like human morals, so it could very easily kill a human being and extract all of the salt out of the human being because it needed salt. And it didn't have any morals about doing so. Survival was its only mission. And it did take some of Captain Kirk's crew before they were able to finally discover what was going on and eradicate the species, eradicate the last member. It was the last member, like sort of like what almost happened to the American buffalo, but didn't, because we were able to save it, but it almost went extinct. And of course, Brunswick's not going to go extinct, but this particular strain of Brunswick, which I value very much, which came from my great uncle, that brought it from Italy 70, 80, maybe more years ago. And it's just a family heirloom, and I just don't speak of it much. But believe me, when it produces figs, they are delicious. Very, very delicious. With that, I hope you enjoyed this chat. I'm not going to expand it to anything else right now, except to look at some of these beautiful, beautiful little figlets. Look how abundantly these are producing. Look at all every node. Remember, I always stress that. I always stress that. For what it's worth, I stress, don't grow big trees, grow little trees that produce lots of, guess what? Fruit on every single node, everywhere. That's what you're trying to accomplish, you see? And when you do that, the trees will grow slowly, and it will take years for them to get too big to where they need radical pruning, but they're bear an abundance of delicious fruit. And that's, of course, the goal that we have That's what we strive for. If you look here, look at that. Look at all that fruit. Can you see it? That's the lesson I keep trying to convey. What happened to my butterflies? Look at all that fruit. Look at that. A fig on every node. No pinching necessary. Okay. Here we have the garden. And I've got a few more zucchini to plant, a few other things to put in here. You might wonder, what are these upside down flower pots doing in my garden? Well, yesterday our son was here and we planted cucumbers, and I had to break apart the root ball a little bit, which you should do so that they will spread out better. Sometimes if you just take them out of the carton or container and plant them directly in the ground without breaking it up a little bit, they won't grow. The roots will just stay right there and not spread out. Or by the time they do, it's too late. You don't get much of a crop, almost anything, nothing. So I did that. I protect them to shield them just for a day or two. Not unlike the fig I talked about in another video recently. And I try to shield them from the midday heat and the ravages of the ultraviolet rays from the sun just for a couple days until they take root a little and become better hydrated. So it's just something I do. Is it necessary? Sometimes. Sometimes it really, especially when it's hot like this. It's very hot, and especially when you're planting a little late and I'm behind schedule. Here it is like the 3rd of June. These should have been planted 2 weeks ago, and they're not. And it was cooler then. When it's cool or cloudy or rainy, you don't need to do things like that. But you've got to be cognizant. Situational awareness, I stress often. Situational awareness. You have to be cognizant of these things and think, wait a minute. You know, it's June now. It's hot. We're, not even 3 weeks away from the solstice, the summer solstice. The sun is at its highest point almost. And the daylight hours are longer, and and the sunlight is intense. And I'm planting these trees later than these plants later than I should. Hopefully I would have been able to get them into the garden earlier, but I didn't. So it is what it is. And so until it cools down a bit, or until these plants take root and are able to fend for themselves, I'm going to shield them. I'm going to shield them from the intense midday hours of the sun, and then in a few days I'll remove those and they'll be fine. Okay. Thank you for your visit. Good day.